Her skin glistened under the steam, a forbidden shimmer that caught my breath and held it hostage. I stood frozen in the hallway, the bathroom door ajar just enough to frame Laura's silhouette, her curves softened by the mist, her movements slow and unaware. My heart thundered. A traitor to my purpose here, to visit Sophie, my girlfriend, not to spy on her mother. But my feet betrayed me, rooted, as Laura's hands traced her arms, water cascading in rivulets that seemed to burn the air between us. I should have turned away. I didn't. And when her eyes met mine through the crack, sharp and knowing, the world tilted. She didn't scream or cover herself. She paused, her gaze a silent dare, and in that moment, I was lost. I'm Ethan, and this is my confession, a wound I carve open with every word. That day, 3 months ago, was the spark that set my life ablaze. Sophie was upstairs, napping after a long shift, oblivious to the storm brewing below. I'd meant to grab a glass of water from the kitchen, but the bathroom's faint hum of water pulled me like a siren's call. Laura, Sophie's mother, was 42, a woman whose quiet elegance had always unnerved me. Her soft laughter, the way her fingers lingered on a wine glass, her eyes that seemed to see too much. I'd noticed her, of course, but always pushed the thoughts down, buried them under loyalty to Sophie. Until that door, that glimpse, unravelled everything. She stepped out of the bathroom minutes later, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp and clinging to her neck. The house was silent, save for the creak of the floor under my guilty steps. "Ethan?" she said, her voice low, not accusing, but heavy with something I couldn't name. "You saw me?" No question, just fact. My mouth dried, words failing me. I nodded, heat creeping up my neck. She stepped closer, the towel's edge brushing my arm, and I swear the air crackled. "You shouldn't have," she whispered, but her eyes didn't match her words. They burned, curious, alive. My pulse raced, a drumbeat of want and wrong. I should have apologized, fled. But instead, I stayed, caught in the gravity of her presence. Her hand touched my wrist, light as a feather, but it seared. "This is dangerous," she said, her breath warm against my cheek. I knew it was. I felt the weight of Sophie upstairs, the life we'd built over 2 years, the trust I was about to shatter. But Laura's touch was a current, pulling me under, and I didn't fight it. She leaned in, her lips grazing mine, tentative at first, testing my resolve. I broke. My hands found her waist, the towel slipping slightly, and our kiss deepened, hungry, reckless. The world narrowed to her warmth, her scent, jasmine and steam, and the soft press of her body against mine. We stumbled into the laundry room, the nearest refuge. The door barely closed before her towel fell. My hands roamed her skin, still slick from the shower, each touch a spark that fed the fire in my chest. Her fingers tangled in my hair, guiding me, urging me closer, and I obeyed, lost in the rhythm of her breaths, the quiet moans that filled the small space. It wasn't just her body. Though God, it was exquisite, soft and firm in ways that made my head spin. It was the way she looked at me, like I was more than Sophie's boyfriend, more than the aimless 25-year-old drifting through life. She saw me, and that gaze was a drug. Our movements were urgent, a dance of need and shame. Her back pressed against the dryer, its cool metal a stark contrast to the heat of her skin. My lips traced her collarbone, her throat, each kiss a confession of my weakness. Her hands were everywhere, pulling me into her orbit, and I gave in, letting the world outside dissolve. The creak of the house, the risk of Sophie waking, only sharpened the edge of our desire. We were thieves, stealing moments that didn't belong to us, and every second was electric, a pulse of forbidden life. When it was over, we stood panting, her forehead against mine, our breaths mingling in the dim light. Reality crashed in. Sophie, the betrayal, the line we'd crossed. "This can't happen again," Laura said, her voice trembling, but her eyes still held that spark, that dare. I nodded, knowing I didn't mean it. The guilt was a knife, twisting deep, but so was the ache for her, already clawing at me. I pulled away, straightening my clothes, my hands shaking. She wrapped the towel around herself, her expression unreadable, and slipped out, leaving me alone with the hum of the dryer and the weight of what I'd done. I went back to Sophie's room, my heart a war zone. She stirred as I sat on her bed, smiling sleepily, unaware of the traitor beside her. I kissed her forehead, the gesture hollow, and hated myself for it. But even as guilt gnawed, my mind drifted to Laura, her touch, her breath, the way she'd made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. I was a fool, a coward, but I was already hers, caught in a web I didn't want to escape. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every sensation. The shame was real, but so was the thrill, a dark pulse that kept me tethered to Laura. I knew I should end it, confess, or at least stay away. But the truth was uglier. I didn't want to. I wanted her again, wanted the fire, the danger, the way she made me feel seen. And so, I didn't run. I waited, knowing she'd call me back, knowing I'd answer. The days that followed were a fever dream, each moment laced with the memory of Laura's skin, her whispered dares. I went through the motions with Sophie. Dinners, movies, her laughter a reminder of the life I was betraying, but my mind was elsewhere, tethered to stolen glances and the promise of more. Laura and I didn't speak of it at first. Our interactions in Sophie's presence clipped, polite, a mask of normalcy. But her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, followed me, and I felt their weight like a touch. It was only a matter of time before the thread snapped. It happened on a Tuesday, Sophie at work, me at their house under the pretense of fixing a leaky faucet. Laura opened the door, her hair loose, a silk blouse clinging to her frame. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice was soft, inviting. I stepped inside, the air thick with unspoken want. We didn't bother with words. Her hand found mine, pulling me to the living room, where sunlight spilled through the curtains, gilding her skin. Our lips met, fierce and familiar, and the world fell away again. This time there was no hesitation, no tentative testing. We were bolder, hungrier, as if the first transgression had broken some dam within us. Her fingers traced my jaw, my chest, each touch a spark that set me ablaze. I lifted her onto the couch, her legs wrapping around me, and we moved together, a rhythm born of desperation and need. Her breath was hot against my ear, her murmurs a litany of encouragement, urging me deeper into the abyss. The fabric of her blouse slipped, revealing the curve of her shoulder, and I kissed it, tasting salt and warmth, my hands memorizing every inch of her. The house, Sophie's house, was both sanctuary and cage. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart lurch, the threat of discovery sharpening our desire. Laura's nails grazed my back, a silent claim, and I responded in kind, my grip tightening, our bodies a tangle of urgency and surrender. It wasn't just the act, though God, the way she moved, fluid and commanding, drove me to madness. It was the connection, the way her gaze locked onto mine, stripping me bare. She saw my loneliness, my hunger for something more than the drift of my days, and she fed it, filled it with her own. We stole moments like thieves, A quick touch in the kitchen while Sophie showered upstairs, our hands brushing under the table during dinner, each contact a pulse of electricity. One afternoon, with Sophie out running errands, Laura pulled me into her bedroom, the air heavy with her perfume. The bed, her bed, was a line I hadn't crossed, and the weight of it hit me as she pushed me down, her hair falling like a curtain around us. "We shouldn't," I said, my voice weak, but she silenced me with a kiss, deep and consuming. Her hands were deft, peeling away my defenses, and I let her, lost in the heat of her skin, the soft moans that vibrated through me. Our encounters grew reckless, the boundaries blurring. In the garage, her back against the wall, our breaths ragged as we fought to stay quiet. In the backyard, hidden by the shadow of the oak tree, her laughter low and teasing as she pulled me close. Each time the guilt was there, a shadow at the edge of my mind, but it was drowned by the rush, the way Laura made me feel alive, wanted, whole. She was aflame, and I was helpless, drawn to her even as I burned. But the shame was growing, a weight I couldn't shake. At night, lying beside Sophie, her trust a knife in my chest, I'd replay our moments, hating myself for the thrill they brought. I was betraying her, destroying the family she loved, yet I couldn't stop. Laura was a need I couldn't name, a mirror to the parts of me I'd buried, my fear of being unseen, my craving for intensity. She gave me that, and I took it, greedy and weak. One evening, as Sophie cooked dinner, Laura brushed past me in the hallway, her hand grazing my hip, a deliberate spark. My pulse spiked, and I followed her to the pantry. The door barely closed before we were on each other, our kisses frantic, her body pressed against mine. The clatter of pots in the kitchen was a distant warning, but we were too far gone, lost in the heat, the danger. When Sophie called out, asking where we were, Laura pulled back, her eyes wild, her lips swollen. "Go," she whispered, and I did, my heart pounding, my skin still humming with her touch. I returned to the kitchen, forcing a smile, but Sophie's eyes lingered on me, a flicker of something, suspicion, that made my stomach twist. Laura joined us moments later, composed, untouchable, and I envied her calm. I was unraveling, caught between the woman I loved and the woman I craved, each moment with Laura a step deeper into a darkness I couldn't escape. I wanted to stop, to confess, to save what was left of my soul. But her pull was too strong, her touch a promise I couldn't refuse. The line between caution and recklessness blurred until it vanished. Laura and I were no longer just stealing moments. We were chasing them, each encounter more brazen, each touch a defiance of the consequences closing in. The house, once a haven, felt like a trap, its walls whispering our secret with every creak. Yet the danger only fueled us, turned our desire into something sharp, almost violent. I was drowning in her, in the heat of her skin, the cadence of her breath, and the way she made me feel like I was enough. But the guilt was a tide, rising higher, threatening to pull me under. One afternoon, Sophie left for a weekend work retreat, leaving the house empty save for Laura and me. I told myself I'd stay away, that I'd use the time to clear my head, to find a way out of this spiral. But by evening, I was at their door, my resolve crumbling under the weight of her pull. Laura answered in a thin sundress, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin, her eyes alight with that familiar dare. "You shouldn't be here," she said, echoing our old refrain, but her smile betrayed her. She stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold, knowing I was damning myself further. We didn't make it past the foyer. Her hands were on me, urgent, pulling me to the floor, the hardwood cool against my back as she straddled me. Our kisses were fevered, a clash of need and desperation, her fingers digging into my shoulders as if anchoring herself to me. The world narrowed to the press of her body, the soft gasps that broke the silence, the rhythm we found without thought. Her dress bunched at her hips, and I traced the curve of her thigh, each touch a spark that fed the fire in my chest. She moved with a grace that undid me, her eyes never leaving mine, holding me captive in a gaze that saw every fracture in my soul. It wasn't just the physical, though God, the way she felt, warm and alive, was a drug I couldn't quit. It was the way she filled the hollows in me, the places where I'd felt unseen, adrift. With Sophie, I was steady, reliable. But with Laura, I was raw, exposed, alive in a way that terrified me. Her whispers, soft and commanding, wove through the air, urging me closer, deeper, until there was nothing but us, a fleeting universe of heat and want. When we finally stilled, her forehead pressed to mine, our breaths ragged. I felt both invincible and broken. But the house wasn't ours forever. The next morning we pushed further, testing fate. In the kitchen, her back against the counter, our laughter low and reckless as we fumbled with buttons and zippers. The windows were open, the neighborhood alive beyond the glass, and the risk made my pulse race, a drumbeat of fear and thrill. Her lips traced my jaw, her hands guiding me, and I gave in, lost in the cadence of her movements, the way her body answered mine. We were careless, drunk on each other, and it nearly cost us everything. The sound of a car door slamming snapped us apart. Sophie, home early, her voice calling out as she entered the house. Panic seized me, my heart a wild thing in my chest, as Laura smoothed her hair, her calm a stark contrast to my chaos. I scrambled to the living room, grabbing a book to feign reading, my hands trembling. Sophie appeared, tired but smiling, oblivious to the storm she'd walked into. "You're here," she said, kissing my cheek, and the warmth of her lips was a blade, cutting deep. Laura joined us, her voice steady, offering coffee, and I marveled at her composure, envied it. But Sophie's eyes lingered on me, a question in them I couldn't answer, and I knew we were treading too close to the edge. That near miss should have stopped me. It didn't. If anything, it made me hungrier, the thrill of almost being caught a twisted aphrodisiac. Laura felt it too. Her touches grew bolder, her whispers more daring. One night, with Sophie asleep upstairs, Laura slipped into the guest room where I was staying, her silhouette a shadow in the moonlight. "This is madness," she murmured. But she climbed into the bed, her body warm and insistent against mine. Our movements were slow this time, deliberate, each touch a confession of our weakness. Her breath was hot against my neck, her hands mapping my skin, and I surrendered, caught in the tide of her. The guilt was a constant now, a weight I carried in every smile I gave Sophie, every lie I told to cover my absences. I saw it in Laura too, in the fleeting shadows that crossed her face when Sophie hugged her, unaware of the betrayal. We were destroying something sacred, tearing apart the family Sophie cherished, and yet we couldn't stop. I tried once to end it, told Laura we had to, that it was killing me. She nodded, her eyes wet. But the next day, her hand brushed mine in the hallway, and I was hers again, weak and willing. I was torn, my heart a battlefield. I loved Sophie, her kindness, her trust. But Laura was a fire in my blood, a need I couldn't shake. The thought of losing her, of returning to the grey drift of my life, was unbearable. But so was the fear of discovery, the image of Sophie's face if she knew, the devastation we'd wrought. I was a coward, trapped between ending it and falling deeper, each choice a wound I couldn't heal. The edge we danced on grew sharper, each stolen moment a step closer to ruin. Laura and I were reckless now, our desire a beast that fed on risk, blind to the cost. The house, once a stage for our secret, felt like a noose tightening around us. Sophie's presence, her laughter, her touch, was a constant reminder of the life I was dismantling. Yet I couldn't pull away from Laura. Her warmth, a siren's call I was too weak to resist. My heart was a fractured thing, split between love and lust, duty and damnation, and I knew the end was coming, a reckoning I couldn't outrun. It was a Sunday, the air heavy with late summer heat, when the thread finally snapped. Sophie was out with friends, and Laura and I seized the chance, our bodies colliding in her bedroom, the curtains drawn to shield our sin. Her skin was fever-hot, her breaths ragged as she pulled me close, our movements a desperate prayer to hold back the inevitable. Her fingers wove through mine, her lips tracing my throat, and I lost myself in her, in the rhythm of our shared surrender. The world outside ceased to exist, reduced to the pulse of her against me, the soft moans that filled the air like a forbidden hymn. We were reckless, loud, too consumed to hear the front door open. Sophie's voice cut through the haze, sharp and confused. "Mom? Ethan?" My heart stopped, ice flooding my veins as Laura froze, her eyes wide with the same terror I felt. We scrambled apart, but it was too late. Sophie stood in the doorway, her face a mask of shock, then betrayal, as she took in the scene. Laura's dishevelled hair, my half-buttoned shirt, the guilt written across us both. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed every excuse I might have conjured. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking, and the sound was a blade, slicing through what was left of me. Laura spoke first, her voice trembling but steady. "Sophie, I'm so sorry." But Sophie didn't look at her. Her eyes were on me, searching for the man she thought she knew, finding only a stranger. "You," she said, tears spilling over. "You were supposed to love me." I opened my mouth, but no words came, only shame, thick and choking. She turned and ran, the slam of the front door echoing like a gunshot. Laura sank onto the bed, her face in her hands, and for the first time, I saw her unravel, her strength crumbling under the weight of what we'd done. I wanted to chase Sophie, to beg, to explain. But what could I say? That I loved her but craved her mother? That I was weak, lost, seduced by a fire I couldn't resist? The truth was uglier than any lie, and I had no right to ask for forgiveness. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, as Laura's quiet sobs filled the room. "We destroyed her," she said, her voice hollow. "We destroyed everything." I wanted to comfort her, to hold her, but the space between us was a chasm now, filled with the wreckage of our choices. The days that followed were a blur of pain. Sophie moved out, staying with a friend, her silence louder than any accusation. I tried calling, texting, but she blocked me, her absence a wound that bled with every breath. Laura and I didn't speak, didn't touch, the fire between us snuffed out by the devastation we'd wrought. I saw her once, at the house, packing Sophie's things. Her eyes were red, her movements mechanical, and when she looked at me, there was no spark, only regret. "You need to leave," she said, and I did, carrying the weight of her words like a sentence. I moved to a cheap apartment across town, my life reduced to boxes and ghosts. The thrill of Laura, the rush of our stolen moments, was gone, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I replayed every touch, every whisper, not with desire, but with disgust, hating the man I'd become. I'd betrayed Sophie, broken her family, and for what? A fleeting high, a false sense of being seen? Laura had filled a void in me, but it was a lie, a mirage that left me emptier than before. I wrote Sophie a letter, pages of apologies, explanations, truths I hadn't dared speak. I didn't send it. She deserved better than my excuses, better than the coward who'd torn her world apart. I thought of Laura, wondered if she was as haunted as I was, but I didn't reach out. We were poison to each other, our connection a flame that had burned too bright, leaving only ash. Months later, I heard Sophie was dating someone new, rebuilding her life. The news was a bittersweet ache, relief that she was healing, grief that I'd lost her forever. I saw Laura once, from a distance, at a grocery store. She looked older, her elegance dimmed by sorrow, and I turned away, unable to face her. The guilt was my companion now, a shadow I'd carry always, a reminder of the line I'd crossed and the lives I'd shattered. I'm Ethan, and this is my confession, a story of weakness, of a love that wasn't love but a hunger that consumed me. I wanted to be seen, to feel alive, and I paid for it with everything I held dear. There's no redemption here, no neat ending. Just a man, alone, learning to live with the weight of his sins, hoping one day to forgive himself, knowing he may never.